So once again, I'm just continuing on my face here, still making it get lighter and lighter as I move down on this particular spot. I'm almost down to the white value. So barely pressing down there. And then this cheek, I'm going to do more of this color. But this cheek is still mostly white, especially here in the middle. And then there is sort of a spot here, because that cheek is puffed out as if it has a warhead in it. So there is some shading here that's not dark enough to use the red for, but I should go ahead and use this color for. So once again, just turning the page whichever direction helps the most. Looking at my reference image a lot as I am working to make sure that I get those shadows and highlights in the right spot. There is a spot sort of down here between his eyes going on to the nose. But then the nose itself is quite white, pretty much. So once again, just looking for where the values need to be, where the colors need to be, and where it needs to be white. And this color comes up a little bit more. Just kind of around that cheek area. Then his ear has a bit more of this peachy peach, not so much pink. So I'm going to go ahead and use that color here. Just because when I look at his ear, they do look like a slightly different shade or a different type of peach. So I do want to make sure that I note that and reflect that. Still have not used any of my white pencil because I basically just want to leave that step to add white anywhere that I need white all at once, instead of going back and forth multiple times with the white. But I am almost there, because once I get these ears done, I feel like that will be my next step. But remember, once you are even at a step like that, where it's pretty close to finishing, you still may need to go back and add shading, so there is still some sort of back and forth between the shading and the colors and the values that you are using in order to get it as accurate as possible. So I'm just going to kind of show you how the white does not make a big difference, but it does help smooth out some of those transitions into the white section. So once again, using the white is not completely necessary, but sometimes it does help. And other times it just gives you a bit more peace of mind because you know you've made that transition as smooth as you can, because the white does kind of just act as a smoothing out sort of color. Just do not rely on the white to actually make white, because it will not cover over any of the colors so much that it actually gets back to white. You do want to make sure that where you have white, you leave the paper showing. So right now I'm just kind of working on this cheek area, starting with a little circle in it, and then extending that circle wider and wider, going over what I've already done with my other colors in the process, and kind of smoothing those colors out, but also sort of lightening them up a little bit and smoothing out those transitions. So a lot of times I'll only use white in an area where it's transitioning into white. I will not typically color something that is white with a white colored pencil. So that might be about all the white that I would use on his face. And then my next step is going to be to find the sort of gray areas in the cloudy space, and I can draw those with a regular pencil very lightly since I am using gray, or if those types of spaces are in a specific color on your candy enlargement, you'll probably want to draw them the color that you will be filling them in. So I'm just going to draw it with a pencil since it is gray. And it just kind of mimics the edge of the cloudiness and just kind of puts in a little crescent moon in certain places. So once again, it's very important to make sure that you are looking at your reference image for something like this, because you do want to make sure that it actually looks like what you want it to look like. So then this part doesn't have any of it. And then I'm going to move back down here, and there's sort of a spot here that has one. And then these three are kind of connected by one. So I'm going to turn my page because, once again, it's just easier for me to draw my curves in a certain direction. So the best thing to do is just make sure that you are allowing yourself to draw in the way that is most comfortable to you as much as possible. And then underneath this section, there's more of sort of a gradation transition under the lettering, sort of a fade from gray into the white. So I'm not going to draw anything there, but I am going to go ahead and draw a little bit more of my shape shading here, because there are a couple more places. And then there's one sort of larger one here. And then since all of those are gray, I could use a gray colored pencil. I could use a black colored pencil and barely press down. I could use a regular pencil because this is still gray. So I could easily just come in here and just color very neatly and just keep it as even as possible throughout that whole thing. Or if I feel like that's a little bit too dark, then I could get a gray colored pencil, which will also smudge a little bit less. And also might be harder to find, so I've got a black one here. And what I'm going to do is just barely press down. Because I do not want it to turn out black, I just want it to be gray. So I'm almost only making my lines in one direction, but keeping them really close together so that it doesn't look like they're all individual lines. And then I'm going to go back over it like I am now, barely pressing down, just kind of smoothing out and making sure that I don't have lines that I don't want, making sure that it's as even as I can get that particular shape. And then along the edge of the paper, I'm just going to go in the other direction so that I can make sure that it doesn't just stop when I get there. And I'm going to use my circle technique to kind of merge the vertical and the horizontal shading together so that there are no lines in between. And then all I would do at this point would be to take an eraser and just erase any stray pencil marks from the drawing step. And then if I need to go back in to sort of redefine the shape with the coloring, I could do that after I have erased the pencil lines. So then that might be an example. I'll zoom in a little more because it is kind of hard to see just because of how light they are. But that is an example of doing the shape type of shading. So now you've seen some of the background, you've seen color transitions, you've seen regular shading, and you've seen shape shading, all of which are different techniques and methods for coloring and shading that you all will be using as you work on your candy enlargement projects.